Megan Daniels was ready for a fresh start. After ending a long-term relationship, she decided it was time to move to a new city and start over. That's how she found herself in the heart of downtown, renting a quaint apartment on Willow Street. The rent was surprisingly affordable, and the building had a charm that drew her in with its vintage architecture and ivy-covered walls. It seemed like the perfect place to begin her new chapter. The landlord, an older woman named Mrs. Whitaker, was eager to sign the lease. "You're going to love it here, dear," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The previous tenant left in a bit of a hurry, so we had to lower the rent. But it's quiet and mostly peaceful." Megan didn't pay much attention to the odd emphasis on mostly. She was too busy imagining how she would decorate her new space, and besides, she wasn't one to believe in superstitions or ghost stories. She had a firm grip on reality, or so she thought. The first night after spending the whole day moving in and setting up, Megan was exhausted. She decided to celebrate her first night in the apartment with a glass of wine and a hot bath. The old clawfoot tub was one of the features she loved most about the place. As she soaked in the warm water, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The sensation was so strong that she kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting to see someone there. But the bathroom was empty. "Get a grip, Megan," she muttered to herself, chalking it up to the exhaustion of moving. But as she climbed into bed, she couldn't help but notice that the air in the apartment had turned cold. Not just chilly, bone-chilling, like she had stepped into a freezer. She shivered, pulled the blankets tighter around her, and tried to sleep. That's when she heard it, a soft tapping noise, coming from the corner of the room. At first, she thought it was just the old building settling, but the sound grew louder and more rhythmic, like someone was drumming their fingers against the wall. Probably just the neighbors, she reassured herself, though it didn't ease the growing knot of fear in her stomach. Things take a dark turn over the next few days. The strange occurrences escalated. The tapping became more frequent, always at night, and always coming from different parts of the apartment. Megan also started noticing things out of place. Her keys moved from the counter to the living room, pictures tilted on the walls, and sometimes she would wake up to find her bedroom door wide open, even though she always closed it before going to bed. One evening, as she was washing dishes, she heard a faint whisper. It was so soft she couldn't make out the words, but it was unmistakably a voice. She froze, her heart pounding. "Hello?" she called out, but there was no response. The air in the kitchen grew colder, and she could see her breath fogging up in front of her. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Leave. Now." Megan dropped the dish she was holding, the sound of it shattering on the floor snapping her out of her daze. She turned off the water, grabbed her phone, and tried to call a friend, but the screen was nothing but static. "What the hell is going on?" she whispered to herself, fear gnawing at her insides. Seeking help, determined to get some answers, Megan decided to do some research on the building. She went to the local library and combed through old newspaper archives. That's when she found it, a small article from 20 years ago about a young woman named Emily who had gone missing from the same apartment Megan was now living in. According to the article, Emily had complained about strange noises and a feeling of being watched before she vanished without a trace. As Megan read further, a chill ran down her spine. Emily had reported the same tapping noises, the cold spots, and the whispers. The last entry in Emily's journal, which the police had found, was a single sentence: "It won't let me leave." Terrified but desperate for answers, Megan reached out to a local paranormal investigator named Sam. He was skeptical at first but agreed to visit the apartment after hearing about the strange occurrences. "I've seen a lot of hoaxes, but this sounds different," he admitted. The investigation Sam arrived the next evening with an array of equipment: EMF detectors, thermal cameras, and audio recorders. "Let's see if we can find anything," he said as he set up his gear. As they walked through the apartment, the temperature dropped drastically, and the EMF detector started to spike. "There's definitely something here," Sam muttered. "I can feel it." Megan tried to stay calm, but her nerves were frayed. Suddenly, the tapping started again, this time louder and more insistent. The noise seemed to come from the walls themselves, surrounding them in a disorienting cacophony. Sam turned on his audio recorder, and they listened intently. A whispering voice came through the static, clearer than before. "You can't stay," it hissed. "What do you want?" Megan yelled into the empty room, but the only response was a deep, guttural growl that sent chills down her spine. Sam's equipment went haywire, the detectors flashing and beeping wildly. "We need to get out of here," he said, grabbing her arm. But as they turned to leave, the door to the apartment slammed shut on its own, trapping him inside. The lights flickered, casting erratic shadows across the walls. Megan screamed as a shadowy figure appeared in the hallway, its eyes glowing a dull, malevolent red. The figure moved toward them, and the air in the apartment became suffocatingly cold. Sam tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. "This thing is feeding off your fear," he shouted. "We have to stay calm." Megan tried to steady her breathing, but it was nearly impossible with the entity closing in on them. Suddenly, she remembered something she had read about in Emily's journal. The only way to weaken the spirit was to confront it head-on, to show no fear. Summoning every ounce of courage, Megan faced the entity. "You're not welcome here," she screamed. "This is my home now. Leave." For a moment, the figure hesitated, its form flickering like a glitch in a video. The temperature began to rise, and the oppressive pressure in the room eased. Sam, seizing the opportunity, kicked the door open, and they both stumbled out into the hallway. The aftermath: the apartment was deathly silent after that night. Megan moved out the very next day, leaving behind everything she owned. She couldn't bear to spend another second in that cursed place. Weeks later, she received a call from Sam. "I went back to the building to do some more investigating," he said. "Turns out, there have been multiple reports of disappearances over the years, all tied to that apartment. It's like the place itself doesn't want anyone to stay." Megan shivered as she listened, grateful that she had managed to escape. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever haunted that apartment wasn't done with her yet. Every so often, in the dead of night, she would wake up to the sound of faint tapping on her new apartment's walls. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but in the pit of her stomach, she knew the truth. The entity from Willow Street had followed her. And this time, it wouldn't stop until it had her. Because some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed.